The first time my wife flinched when I touched her, I told myself I imagined it. The fifth time, I started wondering what kind of man has to second-guess his own marriage from the way a woman pulls her shoulder away in bed. My name is Daniel, I'm 39, and for most of my adult life I thought I understood what commitment looked like. It wasn't fireworks every night or movie scene passion in the kitchen. It was smaller than that. More durable. It was knowing how she took her coffee, remembering which side of the bed made her back hurt less, hearing the garage door open and feeling your whole body loosen because your person was home. That was what I thought I had with my wife, Alyssa. For 11 years, I believed we were solid. In the beginning, she used to reach for me without thinking. Her hand would find my arm in the grocery store. Her head would rest on my chest while we watched TV. She'd kiss me in the hallway for no reason except I happened to be there. It wasn't dramatic. It was easy. Natural. Like being close to me was the most normal thing in the world. Then, somewhere along the way, it stopped being natural for her. I couldn't give you one clean moment when everything changed. It wasn't like a light switch flipped. It was more like watching winter settle in through a window. One day the trees still look alive. Then a week later everything's bare and you can't even say exactly when it happened. At first, it was little things. Alyssa stopped kissing me hello when she got home from work. Then she stopped kissing me goodbye in the mornings unless I leaned in first. She still said the right things. She still asked if I wanted anything from the store. Still reminded me when we needed detergent or paper towels. Still sent me a text if she was running late. On paper, nothing looked broken. But the warmth had started leaking out of the marriage, and I was the only one standing there with my hands under it trying to catch what was left. She worked as an office manager for a private dental practice across town. I manage operations for a regional warehouse. Neither of us had glamorous jobs, but we had built a decent life. A quiet 2-story house in a suburb outside Indianapolis. A black lab named Murphy who shed on everything we owned. Matching coffee mugs from a weekend trip to Gatlinburg 5 years ago. Routines. Bills. Shared passwords. Familiar silence. The kind of life that should have felt safe. Instead, home started feeling like a place where I had to measure every movement. The bedroom was where I felt it the most. That was where the distance stopped being abstract and turned physical. I'd slide into bed beside her, and she'd already be angled away from me, curled toward the edge with her phone in her hand. If I put my hand lightly on her waist, she'd tense up just enough for me to notice. Not enough to create a scene. Just enough to make me remove it on my own. Sometimes she'd say she was tired. Sometimes she'd say she had an early morning. Sometimes she'd say nothing at all and just adjust the blanket like my hand had landed there by accident. The worst part was how polite it became. Not angry. Not even cold in an obvious way. Just absent. Like she was handling an inconvenience as gently as possible. Like I was something she didn't want to deal with but also didn't want to feel guilty about. I kept making excuses for her because that's what men like me do when something hurts and we don't want to name it. I told myself her job was draining her. I told myself maybe she was hormonal, maybe overwhelmed, maybe depressed, maybe just stuck in one of those seasons people always talk about when marriages go flat. I cleaned more. Cooked more. Tried harder to be easier to love. I picked up her favorite tie on Thursdays. I started folding the laundry before she asked. I booked dinner reservations at a place she used to love and acted like I didn't notice she spent half the meal glancing at her phone face down beside her water glass. I never pushed. That's the truth. I didn't nag for affection. I didn't guilt her. I didn't keep score out loud. I'd bring it up gently every few weeks and ask if everything was okay between us. She'd say yes in that clipped, tired way that made it clear the conversation itself annoyed her more than the distance ever bothered her. Then she'd tell me I was overthinking things, and I would swallow the feeling down because I didn't want to be that husband. The insecure one. The needy one. The guy who turns normal stress into drama. So I got quieter. I started noticing details instead of asking questions. That's when things got worse. Alyssa used to leave her phone anywhere. Kitchen counter. Bathroom sink. Couch cushion. Passenger seat. She never cared. Then one week, out of nowhere, that phone became part of her body. She carried it to the shower. Set it face down every time I walked into the room. Changed the passcode after years of us using each other's birthdays for everything. If she left it charging in the kitchen and I happened to pass by, she'd appear seconds later like she had some sixth sense for my proximity to it. I noticed because it was such a sharp change, and sharp changes in marriage are louder than arguments. The thing that really got under my skin wasn't even the secrecy at first. It was the contrast. She acted like my touch irritated her, but that phone made her glow. Some nights I'd lie beside her facing the wall, pretending I was half asleep, and I'd see the reflection of her screen in the dark window across from our bed. Little bursts of light. Her thumb moving. Then that quiet laugh. Not a full laugh. Just a small one. The kind a woman lets out when something delights her before she has time to hide it. I hadn't heard that sound from her in months. Not because of me. Not because of anything in this house. But there it was, alive and effortless, offered to someone on the other side of that screen. I remember one Tuesday in particular because it was so ordinary it should have been forgettable. I got home late after a problem at the warehouse ran over. I picked up takeout on the way back, the grilled salmon bowl she likes from that place near her office. I walked in expecting at least a little warmth because I was bringing dinner and because I was still stupid enough to believe effort mattered. She was on the couch in leggings and one of my old college sweatshirts, phone in hand, smiling at something. She barely looked up. I set the food down, leaned over the back of the couch, and kissed the top of her head. Or tried to. She jolted just slightly, like she hadn't heard me come in, and turned her face away before my lips fully landed. Then she gave me this tight little apology with no softness in it and said she'd already eaten. I stood there holding the takeout bag like an idiot. Not because she'd eaten. Because she looked more startled by my affection than comforted by my presence. Later that night, I told myself again that I was reading too much into it. I showered, fed Murphy, answered a few emails, and climbed into bed around 11. Alyssa came in 20 minutes later. She smelled like her lavender lotion and mint toothpaste. Familiar. Familiar enough to hurt. She got into bed without saying much, stayed propped against the headboard, and went right back to her phone. I reached over after a few minutes and rested my hand gently on her ankle under the blanket. Nothing more. Just contact. Just my wife's skin under my hand. She pulled her leg away so fast it almost felt rehearsed. Then she muttered that she wasn't in the mood to be touched tonight. Tonight. That word stuck with me, because by then it had been months of tonight. I rolled onto my side and stared into the dark, listening to the tiny sounds of her typing behind me. A minute later, she laughed again. Soft. Warm. Real. And for the first time, I stopped asking myself whether something was wrong between us. I started asking who she was still capable of sounding like that for. The next few days, I didn't confront her. I didn't ask who she was texting. I didn't make some speech about trust or respect or how a marriage isn't supposed to feel like two strangers renting the same room. I just watched. That was new for me. For most of our marriage, I had been the guy who fixed things fast. If the sink dripped, I grabbed a wrench. If the budget got tight, I cut back on lunches out and picked up extra hours. If Alyssa seemed stressed, I made dinner, kept Murphy out from under her feet, and gave her room to breathe. I believed attention solved problems. Effort solved problems. Patience solved problems. But patience only works when both people are still standing in the same marriage. I was starting to realize I might have been standing here alone for a while. Once I stopped trying to smooth everything over, the pattern got harder to ignore. She was lighter with everyone else than she was with me. I noticed it on a Wednesday night when her younger sister, Jenna, called while we were eating takeout at the kitchen island. Alyssa picked up on the second ring, and her whole face changed. She sat straighter. Her voice lifted. She laughed twice in the first minute. Real laughs, easy ones, the kind that used to live in this house before everything got careful and dry. I sat across from her with my fork in my hand, watching my wife come alive for someone else over a conversation about a co-worker's baby shower and some reality show I didn't care about. Then she hung up, looked at me for half a second, and went right back to the distant version of herself I'd gotten used to. No transition. No warmth spilling over. Just a door opening and slamming shut. That bothered me more than I wanted to admit. It would have been easier if she was miserable all the time. Easier if the problem looked like stress or depression or exhaustion. But that wasn't what I was seeing. Alyssa still had energy. Still had smiles. Still had that spark. It just didn't seem to belong to me anymore. I started picking up on small inconsistencies too. Nothing explosive. Just little things that don't mean much on their own until they start lining up. She began staying later at the office 2 or 3 nights a week. The explanation was always believable. Inventory issue. Scheduling mess. One of the hygienists called out. The dentist wanted help reorganizing files. I had no reason to challenge any of it, except before all this, she used to tell me those things with detail. Now it was quick, polished, and over. Like she had learned that the less she said, the less there was for me to remember. Then there were the clothes. Alyssa had never been high maintenance. That was one of the things I loved about her early on. She could look good in a sweatshirt and messy bun and never seem like she was trying too hard. But suddenly she was trying. Not every day. Just enough for me to notice. A different perfume on workdays. Lip gloss for a dental office where most of the patients saw her for under 30 seconds. A fitted cream blouse I hadn't seen in years. One Friday morning, I watched her stand in front of the hallway mirror longer than usual, checking her hair from both sides like she cared about the impression she was making long after she walked out that door. When she caught me looking, she asked what. I said nothing. Just told her she looked nice. She gave me a strange look, not pleased exactly. More guarded. Then she grabbed her phone from the table so fast it looked instinctive and slid it into her purse. That phone was always in motion now. One Saturday afternoon I was in the backyard throwing a tennis ball for Murphy when Alyssa came outside to take a call. She didn't see me at first. I was near the fence line, partly blocked by the shed, and Murphy had wandered off to sniff at something in the flower bed. Alyssa stood on the patio with one arm folded across herself, smiling into the phone. Not big. Just enough. She spoke quietly, the way people do when they don't want the sound of their own happiness carrying too far. I couldn't make out every word, but I caught a tone I hadn't heard from her in months. Soft. Playful. Almost shy. Then she turned slightly and saw me. Whatever was in her face vanished so fast it was unsettling. She straightened, ended the call in the middle of a sentence, and asked what I was doing out there like I was the one who had wandered into something private. I told her I lived there. She frowned at that. Like I was being difficult. Then she said it was just Jenna checking in. Maybe it was. But I had heard her on the phone with Jenna 3 nights earlier, and that wasn't the same voice. The distance between us got stranger after that. Not bigger exactly. Stranger. More controlled. She started being careful in ways that made no sense unless she believed I was starting to notice. She'd angle her phone screen away if I walked past. If a text came through while we were sitting together, she'd check it face down in her lap. At night she took the phone into the bathroom when she showered. Who takes a phone into a bathroom full of steam unless they're afraid to leave it alone for 10 minutes? I tried to tell myself there were innocent explanations. I really did. I knew suspicion can rot a man from the inside if he feeds it too long without proof. But denial has its own cost. Denial had been costing me sleep for months. One night, my friend Marcus came by to watch the Colts game. He's known me since college, one of those guys who can read my mood before I say a word. Alyssa was polite when he arrived, even set out a bowl of pretzels and asked if we needed anything, but she felt rehearsed. Like a hostess in a house she no longer emotionally lived in. At halftime, she headed upstairs with her phone and said she had a headache. Marcus watched her go, then looked at me. He didn't say anything right away. Just took a sip of his beer, eyes still on the staircase like he was giving me a chance to speak first. I didn't. Finally he asked if things were good between us. I gave him the standard line. Busy season. Stress. Life. He nodded, but not because he bought it. He nodded because he was giving me permission to keep my pride if I wanted to. Then he said something I couldn't stop thinking about after he left. He said the loneliest place in the world is sitting next to someone who's already emotionally gone. That line stayed with me. Because that was exactly what this felt like. Not fighting. Not chaos. Not some dramatic breakdown with screaming and slammed doors. Just this slow, humiliating realization that the woman sleeping 3 feet away from me was investing her real self somewhere else. A few days later, I came home earlier than usual. It was pure chance. A truck delivery got cancelled, which wiped out half my afternoon. I texted Alyssa to ask if she wanted me to pick up groceries, but she didn't answer. That wasn't unusual anymore, so I just drove home. Her car was in the driveway. When I walked in, Murphy came trotting over, tail thumping against the wall. The house smelled like the vanilla candle Alyssa burns in the living room. For a second, everything looked normal. Her purse was on the chair by the front door. Her shoes were kicked off near the rug. I could hear water running upstairs. I headed into the kitchen to set my keys down, and that's when I saw it. Her phone was on the counter. Face up. Unlocked. And the screen lit up before I even got close. A message banner slid across the top. No name. Just a number I didn't recognize. But the preview was enough. Miss you already. Today was hard not touching you. I stopped cold, one hand still on my keys, my whole body going quiet in a way I had never felt before. Then I heard the shower turn off upstairs. I don't know how long I stood there staring at that screen. It couldn't have been more than 2 seconds, maybe 3, but it felt longer because something inside me had finally stopped arguing with itself. There it was. Not a vague feeling. Not a changed tone. Not another night of her turning away in bed while I lay there trying to convince myself marriage just went through dry spells. It was a sentence. Clear. Intimate. Specific enough to kill every excuse I had left. Today was hard not touching you. My first instinct wasn't rage. It was something colder. Cleaner. Like my whole body had gone into survival mode before my emotions had time to catch up. I set my keys down quietly on the counter and stared at the message again, half expecting it to disappear. It didn't. The number was unsaved. That was deliberate. Alyssa had always saved everyone. Jenna. Co-workers. The dog groomer. The plumber we used once 2 years ago. If a number lived in her phone more than a day, it had a name attached to it. The fact that this one didn't told me more than the message did. She didn't want it labeled. Didn't want to risk a name flashing across her screen in front of me. She had planned around being caught. I could hear the water dripping in the upstairs shower. Murphy was standing near the pantry, looking up at me with that dumb, trusting face dogs have when they think every quiet moment means a treat is coming. I remember kneeling down and scratching behind his ear for 1 second just to give my hands something to do. Then I picked up the phone. I wish I could say I hesitated because of principles. Because of privacy. Because even in that moment I wanted to respect some last shred of dignity in the marriage. But the truth is, I was past dignity. Dignity had been sleeping on my side of the bed for months while my wife laughed into a screen in the dark. I opened the message thread. There wasn't much on it. That was the first thing I noticed. Whoever this was, they deleted often. Maybe daily. Maybe after every conversation. But not enough. Not perfectly. A few messages were still there, probably from the middle of the day when she thought she was safe. One from him. You looked good this morning. Had a hard time focusing after you left. One from her. Stop. I was already nervous. Another from him. You didn't seem nervous in my car. That one hit hardest because of how casual it was. Not a confession. Not some big dramatic line. Just two people continuing something that had already become normal to them. Something practiced. Something real enough to reference without explanation. I scrolled up farther. Nothing. Deleted. My thumb hovered over the number, and I almost called it right there from her phone. Almost. But the shower upstairs had stopped completely by then, and I could hear the cabinet in our bathroom opening and closing. She was minutes away from coming down. I forced myself to think. Panicking would only help her. If I confronted her with half a thread and no plan, she'd deny, deflect, cry, blame me for touching her phone, and erase whatever was left. I knew Alyssa well enough to know that. She never liked messy conflict. She liked controlled outcomes. She liked being one step ahead. So I took screenshots. Fast. Clean. Message thread. Number at the top. Timestamps. Then I sent them to myself and deleted the evidence from her sent folder. My hands were shaking by then, but not enough to slow me down. After that I locked her phone and put it back exactly where I found it, angled the same way on the counter. Then I opened the refrigerator and stood there pretending to look for something while my heart slammed against my ribs. Alyssa came downstairs in gray sweatpants and one of those oversized t-shirts she slept in. Damp hair. No makeup. Barefoot. The familiar version of her, which somehow made it worse. This was the woman whose body used to fold into mine on Sunday mornings. The woman who used to fall asleep with her hand hooked around my wrist like she was anchoring herself to me. She walked into the kitchen, saw me, then saw the phone. I watched her eyes flick to it before they met mine. Tiny. Quick. But there. You're home early, she said. I told her the delivery got cancelled. She nodded once and picked up the phone immediately, almost like it had been left out in the rain and needed rescuing. Then she asked if I wanted dinner, and her tone was so normal it made my skin crawl. I said I'd eaten. That night, I barely slept. Not because I was heartbroken in the dramatic sense. That would come later. What kept me awake was the rearranging of reality. Every memory from the past few months was suddenly moving into a new shape. The late nights. The guarded phone. The flinch in bed. The soft laugh in the dark. The extra time in front of the mirror. My mind kept pulling at all of it, trying to find the exact point where my marriage stopped being mine and turned into a cover. By morning, I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to confront her until I knew who he was. That became the mission. I went to work and functioned well enough that nobody noticed anything off. Emails. Vendor calls. Scheduling problems. I answered questions, signed off on inventory issues, even joked once with one of the guys in dispatch when he screwed up a pallet count. But underneath all of it, my brain was locked on one track. That number. At lunch, I sat in my truck behind the warehouse and called Marcus. He picked up on the second ring and immediately asked what was wrong. I hadn't even said hello yet. That's Marcus. He hears the weight in your breathing before he hears the words. I gave him the stripped-down version. Not the whole humiliating story, just enough. Distant for months. Found messages. Unsaved number. Didn't know who the guy was. He was quiet for a few seconds, then asked what I planned to do. I told him I needed facts before I did anything. He said good. Then he reminded me of something I probably already knew but needed to hear out loud. He said once a liar realizes you're onto them, the truth starts moving. Phones get wiped. Stories get cleaned up. Friends get coached. So if I was going to dig, I needed to do it before she sensed a shift. That afternoon I used one of those public reverse lookup sites from my work computer during a break. The number came back to nothing useful. A mobile line. No listed owner. Could have been prepaid. Could have been under a family plan. Could have been anything. So I changed direction. I stopped trying to identify the number first and started looking at Alyssa's life around it. For the next several days, I watched more closely than I ever had in 11 years of marriage. I noticed she checked that phone most often around 3 windows, early morning before leaving for work, during her lunch break, and late at night after I rolled over. I noticed Tuesdays and Thursdays were the nights she stayed late most often. I noticed she smiled at her screen before those late nights, not after them. Anticipation. Not aftermath. I also noticed a detail that should have clicked sooner. Her mileage. Alyssa's dental office was 12 miles from our house. Round trip with errands, maybe 30 on a busy day. But when I glanced at the odometer one Thursday evening while moving her car so I could get the mower out of the garage, the numbers didn't make sense. She had put almost 90 miles on it since the morning. 90. That wasn't office traffic. That wasn't grocery shopping. I didn't say anything, just backed the car out, moved what I needed, and parked it again. But from that moment on, I started tracking details on my phone like I was building a case against my own life. Dates she stayed late. Odometer numbers when I could get them. Mood shifts. Clothing. Excuses. Every small inconsistency. Then, on the following Tuesday, I got the first real break. Alyssa was in the shower again, and her phone buzzed on the bathroom counter while I was in our bedroom grabbing a charger. I only saw the screen for a second through the half-open door, but that was enough. The number was still unsaved. But this time, a preview line appeared under it. Can't wait for Thursday. Same garage level? Garage level. My stomach dropped. This wasn't random texting. This wasn't some emotional flirtation living in fantasy. They had a system. A location. A routine. And suddenly I knew exactly what I was looking at. I wasn't trying to find out if my wife was betraying me anymore. I was trying to find out how long it had been happening right under my nose. By Thursday, I already knew I was going to follow her. I didn't make some dramatic plan. I didn't call in sick to work or sit in my truck shaking with rage like a guy in a movie. I just adjusted my day, left the warehouse early, and parked across the street from Alyssa's office in an empty lot beside a closed insurance building. My seat was reclined just enough to keep me out of sight. My phone sat in the cup holder. My hands were steady. That was the strangest part of all of it. I thought if I ever caught my wife cheating, I'd feel heat first. Anger. Panic. Some wild need to storm in and force the truth into the open. But what I felt that afternoon was colder than anger. It was the kind of calm that only shows up when your heart has already been bracing for impact longer than you realized. Her office closed at 5. At 5:12, Alyssa walked out the front door. She wasn't alone. A man came out a few seconds behind her, tall, dark blue button-down, sleeves rolled to his forearms, carrying himself with the casual confidence of somebody who had no idea another man's whole life was sitting 50 yards away watching him. He looked to be in his early 40s, fit, clean-cut, the kind of guy who probably got called polished by people who mistook performance for character. Alyssa didn't touch him outside. That was the part that almost made me laugh. They were careful in public. Space between them. No obvious smile. No flirting anyone could clock from the street. Just two people walking in the same direction like coworkers heading to their cars. Except they didn't go to the employee lot behind the building. They crossed to the parking garage next door. Same garage level. My chest went tight, but I stayed put for a beat, counted to 5, then got out and followed on foot. The garage smelled like hot concrete and oil. My footsteps sounded too loud to me, even though I was moving carefully. I stayed near the stairwell, listening more than looking at first. A door shut somewhere above me. Then I heard it. A laugh. Her laugh. Not the polite one she gave me at dinner when I tried too hard to lighten the mood. Not the dry little exhale she used when pretending something was funny enough to acknowledge. This was her real laugh. Warm, loose, alive. The one I had not heard in what felt like a year. I went up one level. Then I saw them. Her back was against the side of a silver SUV near the far corner of the garage. His body was close to hers, one hand braced against the vehicle beside her head. They weren't talking like two people figuring out whether this was a mistake. They were already there, already inside it. Familiar. Comfortable. He leaned in and kissed her, and she kissed him back immediately, like she'd been waiting all day for it. That was the moment. Not the texts. Not the late nights. Not the flinching in bed. Not even the message that said it was hard not touching her. That kiss. Because it erased the last lie I had been telling myself, the one men like me tell when we still want to believe we've just misunderstood the woman we married. Seeing her in his arms didn't feel like discovery. It felt like confirmation of a grief I had been living inside for months without letting it use its real name. I stepped out before I could talk myself out of it. Neither of them saw me until I was close enough that Alyssa's eyes met mine first. I'll remember that expression for the rest of my life. Not guilt. Not at first. Shock, like she genuinely believed this part would never happen. Like I was some complication she had failed to schedule around. She jerked away from him so fast she nearly lost her balance. He turned, confused, then took one look at me and stepped back with his hands slightly raised, not in surrender exactly, more in self-preservation. Alyssa said my name once. Just once. Quietly. I looked at him first. I asked if he knew she was married. He hesitated, glanced at her, and that was answer enough before he even opened his mouth. Then he said she told him things were complicated. Said they were basically done. Said we had not been close for a long time. I nodded because I already knew that part was true in the cruelest possible way. Then I looked at Alyssa. I asked how long. She didn't answer. I asked again. This time she said it started a few months ago, but the way she said it told me that was the trimmed-down version, the version shaped to hurt less if spoken out loud. Emotional first, I'm sure. Then lunches. Then rides to the garage. Then the thing she kept denying me at home became something she handed to him with both hands. I asked if this was why she couldn't stand me touching her. That landed. Her face changed then. Just for a second. Enough for me to know I had finally put words to the ugliest part of it. Because cheating was one betrayal. Letting me lie beside her night after night feeling unwanted while she was giving herself to someone else was another one entirely. She started crying then, but it came too late. Not fake exactly. Just useless. She said she hadn't meant for it to happen like this. She said she felt disconnected from me for a long time. She said she didn't know how to talk to me anymore. She said one thing led to another. The usual coward language people use when they want the gravity of their choices to sound like weather. I didn't yell. That seemed to bother her more than yelling would have. I just asked one last question. I asked if there had ever been a point in the last few months when she came home, got into bed beside me, listened to me trying to understand what was happening to us, and still planned to stop. She couldn't answer that either. The guy muttered that he should go. I stepped aside and let him. I didn't threaten him. Didn't swing on him. Didn't make a scene in a parking garage over a man who was never the real center of the damage. He got in his SUV and left with the kind of speed that told me whatever fantasy he'd been living in had just cracked too. Alyssa tried to follow me when I turned toward the stairwell. I told her not to. That was the first time in months my voice had any edge to it, and she stopped immediately. I drove home alone. She came back an hour later and found 2 suitcases by the front door. Hers. I had packed quickly. Not neatly. Just efficiently. Clothes. Toiletries. Chargers. Enough to make the point. Murphy stayed curled by the couch, confused but quiet, watching both of us like he knew the air in the house had changed for good. Alyssa cried harder then. Said we needed to talk. Said throwing her out was extreme. Said 11 years deserved a conversation. That almost got me. Not because she was right. Because 11 years did deserve a conversation. They deserved honesty before betrayal. They deserved respect before replacement. They deserved one clean moment where she looked me in the face and admitted I wasn't crazy for noticing her disappear. Instead, she gave that conversation to another man in a parking garage. So I opened the door and told her she could stay with Jenna. She left with mascara streaked under her eyes and one suitcase wheel rattling against the porch steps. I stood there until her taillights vanished, then locked the door and leaned my forehead against it for a few seconds. The aftermath was quieter than I expected. No smashed dishes. No dramatic collapse. Just silence. Real silence this time. Not the strained kind that had haunted the house for months. A cleaner one. One that hurt, but didn't humiliate me. In the weeks after, I learned more than I wanted. His name was Eric. He worked with a vendor who serviced the dental office. That was how it started. Small talk. Familiar faces. Opportunity. The affair had been going on for at least 4 months. Maybe longer emotionally. Long enough that my wife had built a second version of herself while I kept trying to revive the first one. She asked to come back twice. The second time, she said she had made a terrible mistake. Maybe she had. But by then, the man who used to lie awake wondering how to become easier for her to love was gone. And the truth is, I didn't miss her first. I missed the version of my marriage I had been protecting long after she stopped living in it.